Who dares disturb the peace of the Avatar?
It's me, Aang.
Is it not customary to bow before your elders? And to avert your eyes? And hop on one leg? Forgive me, I couldn't resist. It's good to see you, Aang. But what took you so long? I thought you would come to seek my advice sooner.
Come along with us on an idle ride through the latest science fiction and fantasy shows, movies, and video games. Welcome to Idle Ride. I'm Marcy, here with my co-host and chosen brother, Paul.
Hey, everyone.
And we're here to talk about the Avatar: Last Airbender Netflix series, Episode 6, Masks. But before we get into that, I talked about how we might be reviewing Fallout, and that is definitely happening because I started watching it and it's amazing. So after we're done with Avatar: The Last Airbender, we'll do a big palate cleanse with something that Marcy is fucking in love with, which is going to be Fallout on Amazon Prime.
It will be a very nice, pleasant change from
the dour depression that is Avatar: The Last Airbender. But actually, this is my favorite episode of the season. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think you had a good feel for this episode.
Yeah, so Marcy, you had told me before I had watched this episode that it was your favorite. And when I watched it, I very much enjoyed it to the point where I even got like 5 minutes into the episode after and then went, no, I have to stop. So I actually wanted to watch the next episode from this. So that's a good change.
It's a good change. Yeah, I really think that this is the episode that did it right in terms of focusing on just two storylines. Mm-hmm. And then the storylines melded together, so it made for a good episode that told the story that it was trying to tell, that didn't go off on 1,000 different places with 1,000 different characters. So, yeah, it did what it was trying to do.
Also, minor spoiler towards the end of the episode, Aang gets to act all like charismatic and fun and not just like, I'm so serious.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about is this is the only episode where I feel like Aang is truly the Aang that we have been wanting him to be this whole season. Yeah, you get everything that you wanted to get in this episode.
Also, I think he needed Zuko to balance him. He needed a real angry, angsty teenager to just make him look lighthearted.
Yeah,
but that's getting ahead of ourselves.
It is, but those are the things that we liked about the episode, so we'll go into it in more detail here. I guess I'll kind of break it up again, but pretty quickly the timelines meld, so we don't have to do too much of that. But the episode starts off with the Iroh voiceover. To be honest, I don't really pay much attention to what the voiceovers are saying, so maybe you did.
Honestly, I don't really have any notes on that either. It was about like, sometimes we have to wear masks because our true face is blah, blah, blah. He does the same thing at the end too, so.
Yeah. Exactly. I just like the timbre of his voice, so when I start hearing Iroh, I'm like, oh yes, okay, we're going to be soothed this episode. So it goes straight into a flashback, and the flashback is Zuko kind of checking himself out in a mirror, and he just looks so innocent and sweet already, like poor baby Zuko. He's like trying to make sure he looks good for the war cancel, and Uncle Iroh comes in and he's like, oh, you look great. And he's like, are you sure? And he's like, well, your pauldrons look a little off. And he starts like adjusting. He was like, great. And then Zuko looks at him and can tell he's eyeing something else. He's like, what's wrong? And then he goes, tell me, like a little kid. It's like such like a teenager moment with his whiny voice, like, just tell me what's wrong. And Iroh tells him that his gauntlets are tied wrong and fixes them and makes sure he's all ready to go to meet his dad in the war council.
And so for me, I have taken tests. I don't have face blindness, but I do have a problem recognizing people when they change their hair a little bit too much. So my first thought opening in this scene was, who's this? Because Zuko is so much less sullen. He's got like this smile just on almost every scene in these flashbacks, and he's got his full head of hair that's glorious.
When he goes to the war council, he has such a sweet smile because he's so happy to be included, and then it's like you just know that the rest of his life is going to be shit after this moment. And
there's one warning that Iroh gave him for going to this council that of course he's not going to obey, and that's don't test the Fire Lord's opinions.
Yeah, keep your fucking mouth shut, Zuko. And of course he can't, but that's why we like Zuko, is because of his warring upbringings between his horrible evil dad and his wonderful mother, who I realized in this episode they mention once, and like you never really see her from Zuko's perspective. And we can talk about it more later, but I think we have spoken about how much we don't like that Lord Ozai has been represented so much in this season. And I think part of the reason is that when we did see Zuko in Zuko's past, it was from Zuko's perspective. And also you saw flashbacks of him and his mother. You never saw flashbacks of him and his dad in that first season. And it's all coming back to me now. Like, they had to show you first why you should like him because he's such an asshole. And those were the scenes that made you like Zuko.
And they're taking a completely different route in the live action one.
Exactly. So after he kind of walks out, heading to the war council, get the flash forward to Zhao taking over Zuko's ship through Mr. Chops. Zuko's like, don't let this spineless toady take over my ship, crewman. And they all just ignore him because he's being bratty like he normally is. And then Zuko leaves because nobody helps him. And Iroh's like, you guys are being assholes.
So I don't understand this part because, okay, the sleazy guy gets his admiral pin, right? So like he's the commander of this mission. And I don't understand how Zuko thinks, well, because I'm a banished prince, I still get to be in charge of this. And anyone who disagrees with me is mutinying.
Well, it is weird because who is in charge? A prince or an admiral? Because the prince is still, in my opinion, in hierarchy above an admiral, even though he might not know what the fuck he's talking about, especially on his own ship. He was given a ship, but you're right. He's a banished prince. So what?
Yeah.
What status is a banished prince?
Like, if the military of this Fire Nation was at all competent, which I'm not going to say they are, they would have given orders to both of them so that everyone knows their place in the hierarchy.
Part of this is always that Ozai is trying to fuck with Zuko, but actually it's not Ozai, it's Azula trying to fuck with Zuko in this moment. Because she's, I think, the one that convinces her dad to give him the admiralty and the extra troops and stuff. I think really what I find is funny is Iroh chastising all of these guys that say that Zuko basically isn't their prince.
Not our prince. Yep. I had that line written down.
And the truth is, Zuko has been treating them like shit. Granted, he hasn't been doing terrible things like beating them and stuff like that, but he definitely is. He's not nice to any of them. He doesn't lead them in a way that a leader should, which is by example.
Right.
So Iroh is the one that's doing those things.
Yeah, it's basically think of any stereotypical teenager who's just too busy thinking about their grungy thoughts and yelling at their mom because the food's not hot enough. That's Zuko.
And it's not fair of Iroh to expect the crew to be loyal to somebody who's been an asshole to them. They didn't know this information that they get at the end of the fucking episode. Why didn't you tell the crew this at the very beginning? Like, you can't chastise people for something that they didn't know about.
Yeah. And also there's a line that Iroh throws out that it's going to matter at the end when we're talking about this information. So I just want everyone to hear that Iroh says to Chops, our favorite soldier, that Zuko knows more about sacrifice than you can ever know. Those are the direct lines, than you can ever know. So like, I think that's overstating it, and we'll find out more later.
It's true. He did get tortured by his father. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily sacrificed a lot, except for giving up being pampered. Anyway.
Yep.
So after that, they transition to Aang's storyline, and you see Aang flying on his glider. He's made it to the Fire Nation temple, and this is pretty much straight out of the episode. Well, it is straight out of the episode Avatar Roku, which is at the very beginning of season 1 of the animation. And this is another reason why I think this episode is so good, is that they melded 2 episodes that are in season 1.
Good job, guys.
Take anything from season 2 or any other season, mix them together in a way that makes sense, add some extra good content, but keeps the essence of the 2 storylines. What?
That's possible?
So Aang makes it to the fire temple. He hides from the sages when they arrive. It's a group of priests, basically, of the Fire Nation.
Yeah.
And then his expectation is that the sages will just welcome him with open arms because they're supposed to be neutral. I don't know how Aang knows this, since apparently he doesn't know jack shit about the Avatar except for what's in Zuko's book. So maybe Zuko wrote it. Here's
where I'm going to throw in. Later in the episode, he tells Zuko that one of his best friends was some kid who was a Fire Nation guy. So like maybe he's just... Oh, you got the name. Thanks. So, like, maybe this is just Aang not fully internalizing the differences that 100 years makes. So he's like, oh, Fire Nation, friends.
I wish that they had shown that his knowledge of the world of Avatar comes from his travels that he used to do.
Like, they very barely hint at it, but, like, Boomy was, like, one of his best friends, and he's Earth Kingdom. He's got a Fire Kingdom best friend. He's traveled quite a bit for a guy who said that the only people who've ever trained him were air nomads.
Yeah. So they're trying to take stuff from the animation that they haven't established in this show. These sages see him, and they attack him. He's surprised. He runs away, and then...
Before there's any tension builds.
Yeah. And another sage grabs him aside and is like, I'm going to protect you. Come with me. And finds a secret tunnel in the wall and takes him into the secret tunnel. And it's pretty straight from Avatar Roku episode. There is a sage that believes that the Avatar is the spiritual leader of the Fire Nation, not the Fire Lord, and then helps him get into the fire temple area where there's a statue of Roku.
Yeah, like the inner sanctum.
I kind of miss the scenes. There's multiple scenes in the animation where when he goes to these temples, all the temples are set up to where the only people who can open them are the benders of that power.
Yeah.
And so in the animation, it was really cool. There's a scene where 5 different fire sages have to use their fire bending power to open the door to the sanctum. And in this, the one fire sage guy is like, I've got a secret tunnel into it. And then he's like gonna protect Aang from 5 fire sages, just to make sense.
I definitely was waiting for that door to show up and be cool. Because I remember that too. Like they had to trick it with airbending and torches and one thing in the cartoon. And yeah, none of that.
None of it. Definitely not as dramatic and cool as I was hoping for. But we get Aang going into the spirit world and meeting my favorite of all.
Ooh.
The avatars.
Before we get to that, because there's something I missed on the first watch through, and it really annoyed me on the second watch through. They brief cut right here where June finds a strand of clothing of Aang's in the woods and then gives the smell to her. I mean, I want to give it the dual names like they do all animals, but it's a what?
Sheer shoe.
Sheer shoe. Thank you. So yeah, like she basically has to say, like, get a DC 50 tracking check to go 300 miles across the ocean to track Aang to this Roku temple.
They really missed out on a couple of things that were really cool about the sheer shoe, which is that they would transition to the quote unquote eyes of the sheer shoe, which is basically its nose because it doesn't have eyes. And so you would see the sheer shoe vision and it would be scents of people. And so it'd just be like different colors. And then the sheer shoe would find the color that is the smell that matches the person. It was always cool when they show you that there's creatures that have different senses that are really powerful, but you don't really get that visual piece of it here. But it is a neat scene.
Definitely. Like, they're cool creatures. I just don't think that she could track someone who's flying over the ocean as well as she does with a land-running beast.
Yeah, like, how did she get to the fire temple? Paul, why do you have to be so logical about this?
So down on this show. Because actually it keys off on something that annoys me about specifically kids shows. And I know that it's almost always kids shows. And so I only get annoyed when it's aimed at like an older audience too. But it's like this idea that just to push the plot forward, every character has perfect knowledge of what they're doing and what everyone else is doing. And they can always like fire the critical shot that hits the guy and distracts him from 500 miles away in the middle of a convoluted battle scene. It's that kind of logic. But I know this is a kid's show, and so I can acknowledge it and move on.
Well, that was what made Avatar: The Last Airbender so good as a cartoon, is that Sokka failed all the time. Like, they fail so much. What's so awesome is that they keep trying and they fail and they fail, and then finally at the end it works out, but there's still a really terrible lesson that they have to learn at the end, you know?
Yeah.
And I think this is certainly exactly what you're saying, is that they've gotten rid of those moments of growth that come from failure. I mean,
yeah,
everyone who is over like 16 knows that your failures are the things that you remember the most. And if you want to grow, you take those moments and you say, I don't want that to happen again. Here, there's not enough of those growth moments. That was June.
Yep. So I can say the one other thing that I thought was hilarious, just because we keep throwing Star Wars references into this, is the one guy who helps Aang get into the inner sanctum and tries to block the other guys. They have like a little back and forth about him saying like, you know, the Avatar is supposed to be force of bring balance to the Force. And then the one leader of them is like, no, only the Fire Lord can balance the Force. It's like, okay, all right, Darksider.
What character would the Dark Sage be? Probably like, he's Darth Maul, the sub-commander of Darth Ozai.
That's right.
That's what we should start calling them, Darth Ozai.
Darth Ozai, perfect. So yes, now Aang is in the spirit realm.
Okay, now Aang is in the spirit realm, and he is confronted by Avatar Roku, and like, this is what I wanted. If you had this, think about this, Paul.
Okay.
If this had been your first experience in this show, the live action, of him going into the spirit realm and meeting one of the avatars.
Okay, so Kyoshi didn't happen. This is his first time. Okay.
And Avatar Roku comes up, he makes a joke, he doesn't blame Aang, he's like, well, there's lots of ways of being an avatar, one of them is a diplomat, teaches him a little bit about it. Like, he makes this hilarious fucking joke about Kyoshi being super stiff.
Yeah, she's just like this, and then he mimes it.
Like, being stiff, yeah, it was like so good. This is the encounter that should have happened, because then Aang would have been encouraged to do more than just be upset and depressed the whole time.
Yeah, also it gives a sense of this playfulness that Aang should have when Roku is like, super stern at first, shouldn't you bow? And something else, and then lift one leg in the air. It's like, oh, you're just fucking with me.
Yeah, and I feel like that as an entrance into the world of the Avatar is a better one to show you that all of these people were just people. And that Kyoshi is presented as this like almost superhero character, which is actually not how you're supposed to view it. I mean, yes, they were all technically superheroes, but I think they were all people first. That was how it went in the animation, and it's so much better. Anyway.
But we don't need to tell you that, dear audience. You know. So did you catch with the flashback, he's talking about the face stealer, Ko. Did you catch that it was George Takei's voice?
No, I didn't.
So I totally thought that it was, and then I was like, I'm stupid. It's probably just a thing. No, it's George Takei voicing the face stealer.
Oh, wow. Was he the original voice for the face stealer?
No, okay. It was someone I didn't recognize for the original.
That's cool. George Takei is a great voice to be any kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he did an amazing job. Ko is creepy. I do think, again, we get no payoff for the previous episode in this episode. It doesn't feel like the second part of that previous episode that we watched, really. They kind of talk a little bit about that episode here, where he's like, oh, I'm here to get some advice about Ko. Roku talks about the previous Avatar, Kurok, who lost his girlfriend's face, but he doesn't actually like talk about that incident. And then Roku's like, oh, I didn't beat him. I just stole something from him, basically, and ran away.
A little tchotchke that we did see in the Inner Sanctum when the guy was helping him, just a bunch of Roku's collectibles.
Yeah, all his relics. And I feel like I may be making up this memory of the show, but isn't it like with the Dalai Lama, they'll like lay out all the relics of the Dalai Lama's previous lives? Whichever baby picks up the relics is going to be the Dalai Lama. Well, I think they do that with Aang.
Oh, so they Indiana Jones Last Crusade it, where you have to pick the right cup.
Yeah, basically. But they're like, obviously he's the Avatar because he picked all of like the previous Avatar's relics.
That does sound familiar.
But yeah, so he's like, oh, this is the relic. You give it back to Ko, his mom's toy, so he wants it back.
Yeah, like apparently his mom created the concept of identity, and if that didn't happen, we'd all be the same.
That's a very interesting idea of a god, though. A god that just created independent identity in people. So before that, we were just wandering around as faceless bits of meat. Or maybe it's more just that we were primitive animals.
Maybe that, yeah. Interchangeable.
Faceless bits of meat or animals? Who's to say? So her name was the Mother of Faces, I guess. And I definitely, I want to know more about this, but all you get is that little bit, and they give you that little bit so that they can quickly tie it all up in the end of the episode.
Yeah.
And what does Roku say? Oh, again, finally, an adult who doesn't blame Aang, who just says, you need to put the world's needs ahead of your own. If you don't, you'll have a lot of heartache later.
Sorry, kid.
So Aang comes out of his spiritual world, didn't get attacked. Kind of wanders out of the temple. Oh, everybody's knocked out.
Yeah. So the one guy who was trying to defend Aang, it was 1 versus 5. And the way it cut is like, oh, he's probably dead immediately. So yeah, it is kind of weird that he had an uninterrupted nap to talk to his former self.
And oh, it's June. She made it to the temple just like Paul was saying. Somehow her Shirshu swam across the huge canal to this temple on an island, and she captures him and takes him back to Zuko in less than a day.
No problem.
No problem.
Easy money, actually.
I like her character, well, for one reason, and it's this upcoming line that she says. So Aang wakes up, he asks her, I have to save the world, you gotta let me go.
Okay, that's going to be a theme. This is the second time in this episode that he's begging people to listen to reason and do what he has to say to save his couple of friends, and none of them are going to listen to him.
Yeah, he's just not smart.
Nope.
What do they care about your friends? You should talk more about, I could help rid the world of the Fire Nation, who is literally murdering all of your friends and family or whatever. It's funny when he tries to also reason with the firebenders in this way.
Yep.
They're not going to listen to you, buddy. So she explains, she goes, what is it? Firebenders, earthbenders, whatever benders. And I was wondering what you think a whatever bender would be.
Okay, from that question, taking it the funny route, I'm thinking it's like a drunken master where they can bend anything, but it has to be the thing that's right in front of them.
Yeah, I like that. They are only aware of their current moment.
No object permanence.
I was reminded of, again, the fun episode Tales of Ba Sing Se, where Sokka has to do a poetry slam. And I was like, oh, whatever bender would be really funny if it was just like a verbal speech bender. Like you could mess with people's like speech and what they're saying in the moment, and like a ventriloquist bender.
I love that.
But she explains that she doesn't give a shit. Whatever world we're in, she would be able to survive.
Yeah, she says something about like only smart people are, aware that you just let them fight each other out, the different benders, and then you go pick up the pieces. Like scavenging is the smart thing to do.
So at least this survivalist way of living.
For sure, yeah.
She gives Aang over to Zuko and Iroh. We have another really adorable moment with June squeezing Iroh's cheeks and Iroh basically blushing and looking all like cute and grandpa-y.
Yeah, there's a cute little trope subversion where he says you can count the money and she says she doesn't need to. And he's like, oh, because you know how to find me. And she's like, no, it's because you're cute.
I know. I love that they're switching that around.
Yeah.
I think that Aang lets Zuko tie him up because he's still paralyzed from the Shirshu's tongue. There's a couple of moments where Aang could have easily escaped. Later, they're riding away in a carriage, and he could have just escaped. He could have air-blown himself out of the carriage and probably easily gotten out of those ropes that were poorly tied around his hands, but he doesn't.
Instead, he does, for the third time in this episode, asking Zuko to please have mercy and compassion for his friends that need help. And he says, I'll totally come back and let you capture me again. Of course, that's not going to work.
Make Aang smarter, please.
Yeah, but it does segue into this flashback because he says something about, like, haven't you ever been responsible for someone's well-being and cared about them?
That's right. Good segue. So the Zuko flashback is of him in the War Council. We've already kind of talked a little bit about it in previous episodes, but you see it come to fruition here. I actually think that this scene might be shown in a later season episode of the animation, but here he speaks out against one of his father's plans to sacrifice Division 41 in some ploy to take over the Earth Kingdom. And there's a general there who and Ozai keep kind of like initially shooting down Zuko's ideas for what they could do in this plan. And then they say, no, we're going to do this. We're going to sacrifice this division. One
small detail, Zuko is prompted. He is asked his opinion. He was keeping quiet until Ozai said, no, I want to hear what the prince says. So he's baited.
It's true. He is baited. And Ozai asks for his opinion and then shoots down every one of his recommendations.
Some of the shooting downs are stupid too, because he was saying like the reason why we can't do the horns tactic, the pincer attack, is because there's a mountain on one side, so we can't flank them. So Zuko's like, I'll just bring some fucking tundra tanks, bitch. So in this picture, there are mountains with tanks on top of them, and Ozai says, well, they have earthbenders and we'll crush them with rocks. It's like, okay, so what range do these tanks have, or the earthbenders? Because I don't think earthbenders can shoot rocks a quarter of a mile up a hill.
And also, why do you even have the Tundra tanks there then? If they're going to be crushed. You're not going to use them? That's so dumb.
Yeah.
They're kind of breaking up the meeting. Zuko's kind of pissed because nobody was listening to him. The general comes over and mocks him for being a like baby who shouldn't be here in this meeting. And then he kind of calls out how he thinks that that's a bad plan.
Yeah, and also it's bullshit that the general says you shouldn't be here when this was the prince being invited to be there by the Fire Lord. Like that should have gotten the general in some trouble. And if Zuko was political at all, he probably could have done that. But no, he cares about honor.
He's a hothead. I think Ozai has already determined that Zuko has something wrong with him, which is called compassion, which he talks about later. And he is deliberately trying to break Zuko's spirit so that once Zuko's spirit's broken, then he can rebuild him into an image of what he wants as a prince. And I think that Zuko, what we know of him from the animation, his spirit cannot be broken. It can just be kind of only reformed by himself in a way that is amazing and wonderful. But Ozai is definitely trying to teach him these lessons of brutality. And because of Zuko's mother, you only get one line here in these flashbacks from Ozai about his mother, but you learn that his mother is the one that has been teaching him this compassion.
Now, I think you're probably right with this theory, and I'm not going to disagree with it. But later on, when we get to the Agni Kai and the results of it, I will offer two contrary opinions or contrasting opinions as possible alternate explanations.
Yeah, I think there's a couple moments in that scene where it's like, oh, they decided to change the motivations of Ozai kind of because they actually show his face during when it's happening. And yeah, he's a little bit more complicated, I guess, as a character in the live action than he was in the cartoon because he's pretty one note in the cartoon.
Yeah.
So Zuko is challenged by Ozai to what's called an Agni Kai, which is basically a fight to, it's not even to the death. I think it's like a classic
duel.
And if you give in, then the other person is supposed to just let you give in and you've lost the argument. But in the Fire Nation, it's with firebending. And we get another flash forward to Zhao surprising Zuko on the trail. And, haha, I've caught you. Oh, look, you've got the avatar. Great. I'm going to take the avatar from you, Zuko. And he keeps them from fighting because he's got the
elite
fancy
archers.
warriors, Yuyan archers that Ozai gave him. And I mean, it's not a very complicated scene. Iroh says, "You can't go after them, Zuko. He's going to this impenetrable fortress stronghold. So we'll just have to wait for him to mess up." And then you see Zuko's face being like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to wait.
So I have a question for you. What do you think the story would have ended up like? And we're not talking cinematics, like logically concluding, if Zuko did take Iroh's advice and just waited for Zhao to make a mistake. Do you think Zhao would have made a mistake? Do you think they would have just gotten to deliver Aang to the Fire Lord?
I 100% think Zhao would have made a mistake.
Okay.
It's hard to think about, what future mistake it could possibly be, but Aang from the animation was quite clever a lot of the times about escaping different situations, and Zhao was such kind of an idiot, so much involved in his own ego that often he made dumb choices like, I got the avatar, I guess let's have a party. I mean, that's part of the original animation. He just doesn't kind of think things through, and I feel like even with the fancy archers, he might have been like, okay, I don't need them anymore. We've got the avatar on the boat. We're all good. They still have to take him there. And I think in the journey from the stronghold to the Fire Nation, he might have even been attacked by other Fire Nation people trying to get the avatar. Like everybody's going to be gunning for Zhao or gunning for whoever has the avatar because they want to be the one to present him to the Emperor and get the Emperor's favor. So I feel like in that commotion, they would have lost him because Aang is so wily, would have just gotten away like he normally does.
Okay, I love that you brought in like sort of Fire Nation civil war on who brings the prize. That would have been a cool story.
Yeah.
I think the Aang of the live action is not clever enough to break away, and I think that Zhao would have gotten him to the Fire Lord. But you're right, if it's cartoon Aang, yeah, he would have been out in a day.
Yeah, I can't help but try to superimpose cartoon Aang onto this Aang, even though they're nothing alike. That was a good question.
Oh, before we move on, also when Zuko has to admit defeat because of all the snipers and the 30 soldiers with spears pointed at him, the argument that he has with Iroh is like one of my favorite shots of him, because at one point Iroh's speaking reasonably and Zuko's like about to cry and he puts his fists in front of his eyes and just like walks away and goes, "Ah!" And it's like, oh yeah, that's the temper tantrum we need to see from this kid.
The actor playing Zuko just nails it in this episode. I think he gets all the complexity of emotion that is required, especially when you see him go from this like innocent, happy young prince who just wants to live up to his father's expectations to basically an abused child who doesn't understand why this is happening to him and why his dad doesn't understand reason either. father. Like, why are you doing this to me? Like, you are my father. You're supposed to love me. Like, I had the example of love from my uncle. Why aren't you being like this? This is not what family does. So all of that complexity of emotion he goes through on this really wonderful arc in this episode. It's the best episode of the season, and he's why it is. Then in the stronghold, we get to see Aang. He's captured. He's all locked up, and we get to see Aang.
Marcy's doing a T-pose right now.
Yeah. Aang in chains. An awful lot in this season. I don't remember it happening so often in the cartoon where he's just like constantly caught with his hands bound. And Zhao is certain that he can never escape because he's got his hands and feet chained. But we do get to see the funny scribe from the Blue Spirit episode. So this episode is now entering the Blue Spirit episode from the animation. And I remember that being one of the funniest interactions was between the scribe taking down like everything Zhao is saying and then Zhao constantly like adjusting what he wants the scribe to write down. I remember that being really funny. I do remember the scribe seeming more like the weird advisor from the Disney cartoon Mulan. Where he was a little bit more judgmental than this one is. This one seems like a little just more like, I don't want to get anything wrong.
Yeah. I sort of got the feeling that Zhao was acting like an Instagram model, kind of just like, oh, tell them that there's 4, not 3 guards. And oh, look at me being amazing and fantastic. And he kind of had the, do you remember the Spanish teacher in Community?
Yes.
Yeah, he's got like that sort of authoritarian, like really mean, but like most of the time just goofy and above it all.
I love the idea of like Zhao, the influencer. Like, I've got to be the poster child for the Fire Nation. I only have to show them the good side of me.
Exactly. This is my chance.
So he kind of has a conversation with Aang. Doesn't Aang again try to convince
for
somebody?
For the 4th time, yes.
You've got to let me go, my friends. Nobody gives a fuck, Aang. Like...
The power of friendship is not strong here.
There is this moment, though, where I feel like Aang starts being the Aang that we know and love, which is right here when he uses his air power to blow Zhao over.
Yeah.
As a kind of like a funny prank. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's like very Aang-y. I like that.
So there was another moment in this where this is the mean, scary part of Zhao, where he's like, oh, we're not going to kill you. If we did, we'd have to go find you again. No, you'll live in like some capacity. And it made me think, so imagine this, Marcy, a dystopian world where the firebenders, the Fire Nation has mastered the art of life extension technology. And they just have 150-year-old Aang, and they're just keeping him with like a drip feed just to keep the Avatar out of this world.
Oh, wow. I love that idea. That's maniacal. I think that's a great idea. I mean, you early on in our season talked about how the Avatar isn't good for this world, so why not keep him out of the world in that manner? Like, then he can't use his superpowers to destroy everybody or become an even worse ruler than the Fire Nation.
And if you're a scary nation, like what the Fire Nation has turned into, maybe you want to just keep him as tortured as possible, because when he dies, he's going to corrupt the whole line of avatars with his thinking.
Well, and they kind of mix science and industry later in Korra. So what if it was that they were trying to truly find what links the Avatar to the next baby? And what if they just allowed Aang to die once they found the next Avatar, which was in water, steal that baby, keep that baby,
keep the line.
Or kill that baby, just saying. So they'd have to find the reincarnation until it becomes a Fire Nation baby, and then just keep that baby alive. You brainwash it, and then you have a murder firebender Avatar.
So this is basically
at your beck and call.
This is Dune plus Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, who are the Bene Gesserit?
The Bene Gesserits, yep.
Have to be like the fire sages.
Yes.
That's a really way more dystopian world than I want to live in. Oh, man. So where were we, Paul?
Now we cut to the part where Zhao is celebrating his victory and announcing to his troops, "We have captured the Avatar!"
Yep. And that gives somebody an opening. Who is it? It's a guy in a mask. We don't know. Oh,
There's
we
no
do
way
know.
to know.
I feel like in a cartoon, I guess I just always feel like the cartoon is better. I can't help it, but that you weren't clued in the first time you watch it as much to the fact that it was Zuko. And so you're watching this episode, you're like, who is this guy that's saving Aang? Like, they really work together well. And then when Aang reveals that the blue spirit is actually Zuko, you're like, it's like actually surprising. But in this, like, there's only a few characters, so it's got to be Zuko.
And they would have introduced a mercenary if they were going to bring in a new mercenary.
Oh, yeah, that would have been cool. Or just like a new member of the team that we don't know about. But I guess it was a new member of the team. But love this sequence. I mean, straight out of the animation, so good. The blue spirit, the man in the blue mask, goes and frees Aang, and they're getting out of there, getting out of the stronghold. He's rescuing Aang, and everything about it looks good. I had no complaints. It was amazing. Like the scene where he jumps over the blue spirit and like does his air smashy smash and everybody flies off, and like the ladder walking was so good. Like all of it looked amazing. It
was a very beautiful segment. So the first time watching through, I felt exactly like you did. I loved every second of it. This time when taking notes, the part of me that analyzes like, oh, and this is the Mission Impossible part where they hide under the axle of the vehicle. Oh, this is a classic drop down, snap the guard's neck, take out the other guard scene. Oh, classic person opening the prison door, but it's not the person you think it is, but then they fall down dead. Like, it was very trope after trope after trope, but it was very well executed.
Yeah, well executed tropes. That's all we can ask for. It's good.
It's good.
I think we don't get enough of this sort of fun action. For example, when Zuko the blue spirit arrives in the cell, Aang's afraid, and then he's like, oh, you're right, no talking, let's get out of here.
Yep.
It's a very funny comedic moment. Is what we want. You want Aang to be kind of silly, even in these moments that are very like, we gotta get through this, Aang, like, come on. And he would make things kind of silly, even in these very serious moments. And so, yeah I loved it.
Yep, and the stilt walking thing that they did with those ladders, only an airbender could do that the first try. Like, that's just too dangerous. But that was also like Aang making a funny style of getaway.
Yeah, exactly. Just a unique and clever way of escaping that maybe nobody but an airbender would have thought of, right?
Yep.
So I like that they highlighted those moments in this. And again, all the moments that I feel like are the best moments are the ones that they took directly from the animated series. And straight down to the moment where they're trying to escape, they get almost caught, and then the blue spirit puts his two scimitars across Aang's neck.
Classic hostage scene.
Hostage scene trope, yep. And they let him out of the stronghold, and as they're walking across the field, Zhao orders the Yuyan archer to shoot, and it knocks Zuko in the head, aka the blue spirit. And Aang makes all this dirt fly up and then reveals the person behind the mask.
Oh my god, it was Zuko the whole time.
Yeah. And I think they cut to them in like this weird hut cave thing. I don't know.
Before we cut, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you think Zuko always had that mask? Like, do you know where the mask comes from? Did he go to a market before this encounter and buy it?
He actually spent like hours and hours crafting it. He is an artist, you know.
True. So clearly a good woodworker too.
I do love the idea of him just like, I definitely need a mask just in case I have to go out and do something that I'm not supposed to do. And if you think about it, he's been in exile a long time. And he's never been allowed in Fire Nation territory since he was exiled. So maybe he did have this blue mask hanging around for moments when he did need to go into the territories that he wasn't allowed in.
I like that this isn't his first rodeo. He's been doing clandestine ops for at least 3 years now. It does take a particular set of skills to be a good fighter who doesn't reveal any of your bending powers, especially if you've been trained since childhood to be a prince and a bender and a fighter.
And I think this is what highlights Zuko as such a unique character, because Zuko actually isn't a prodigy bender. He's not the strongest bender that you meet in the Fire Nation, for sure. Mm-hmm. But he was always good at hard work and putting the time in to become really good at the basic moves. And I've said this over and over again, even in the animation, when you watch him fight, he does not use fancy firebending moves. He uses the basic moves really well, and he's also a good fighter, a physical combat fighter. Mm-hmm. So in the animation, Zuko has this small knife that he was given. This knife was given to Zuko by Iroh, and it means a lot to him. And there's a scene, a flashback in the animation where Azula steals the knife from him, and he's fucking pissed, and he's like, you need to give it back. And then it basically has like an inscription on it that's like, never give up or whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this knife is kind of a symbol of his martial prowess, but also like never giving up. If you're not good at firebending, get good at something else. If you don't have your firebending, you can fall back on fighting, which is what he does. He's amazing at fighting.
And determination.
Yeah, great. Exactly. Yeah. And so that's what we like about Zuko later in seasons 2 and 3, but we see it a little bit here in this episode. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but
I did it to you.
You did. It's okay. That's part of podcasts, is tangents.
I was asking you about how he got the mask.
Oh, yeah. So then we see them sitting together in this like hut, hiding away from the firebender troops who are looking for them. And again, we get a little bit more of what we wanted to see of Aang, some playfulness with Zuko. And you actually see that like sort of half shy smile from Zuko that we got when he was heading to the war council. He gives it to Aang here. And it's such like a subtle moment. You could miss it, I guess, that he's slightly smiling at Aang as Aang's like talking about the book and, oh, you draw so well. Like, I've tried to use this special kind of stylus, but do you use goat fur or like rabbit? And Zuko's like not answering him at all, but like kind of enjoying how silly Aang is being.
Yeah, because like the way he brings up the question is like, it's a very personal question. May I ask it? It could have been 1,000 things. Why are you chasing me? You know, like, what's your deal? What's your beef? There's a million questions that, you know, Aang is probably thinking. But no, it's about, hey, let's talk about penmanship.
Yeah.
Aang was talking about, you know, I apologize for stealing your journal, but it's been super helpful, and like throwing compliments. Like, there's information here that nobody's ever had about the Avatars. Like, you're such a good researcher. I thought that was pretty cute. But I was also thinking, what if this was Zuko's full-time journal and some of the pages were just like, I have such a crush on, you know, Mima. And like, I'm so angry. I want to make a rock band.
It is funny to think that it wasn't just an Avatar journal, that he was like drawing little hearts next to his crushes. And
yeah. Today my dad made me real mad.
And Aang's like, yeah, I wish I could make a journal about Katara. Oh, wait. And Aang makes the mistake then of insulting Zuko's dad. And that's where all of Zuko's trauma comes from, is anything having to do with his dad. Because he says something about like, you know what your dad is doing is wrong, so you could be different.
See, that's not my interpretation. My interpretation was that he made the mistake of using the word compassion. Maybe everything before it was...
Oh, Aang says compassion in that line?
Yeah. He says that you could be different from the other firebenders and you could show compassion. And I felt like that word, like in the clinical original definition of triggering, that was like, oh, no, I can't be that.
And also that it's associated with his dad. So I guess...
Yeah.
the trigger is from a line that his dad says him in the moment of his most traumatic moment with his dad. And so you're right that it's more about that than it is about that he's insulting his dad. But he brings up his father, which is, in a sense, just triggering.
Also, yeah, he doesn't know what kind of line he's walking on there when he falls off.
And then Zuko just immediately attacks him with firebending, and Aang deflects it and knocks him out again, I think.
Yeah, which I wrote a note here. By the way, we're 3/4 into the season and Aang still hasn't shown any waterbending.
Yep, no waterbending. There's one little moment that I did want to mention before we move on to the next flashback. Which is there was one line that surely everyone else missed that Zhao says. So he says, make sure the great sage has everything for his research. So that one line encompasses a portion of the story that you're never going to see here from the animation, where Zhao actually goes to the library of Wan Shi Tong and gets information about how to kill the waterbenders and takes it back to the Fire Nation. So I'm assuming that one line is supposed to take the place of that whole storyline, because then that's why Wan Shi Tong doesn't want any more humans in his library, because Zhao was the last straw, because he didn't want humans to be using his knowledge to destroy the world.
Right. This was, for anyone who needs a refresher, this is the owl we saw in the last episode, right?
Yep. Yeah. The owl spirit.
Spirit of knowledge.
Yes. And again, it's just, that is such a more compelling storyline to me, that he actually is determined. He went to this library in the middle of a desert to find information to help him destroy one of the biggest threats to the Fire Nation. But here it's just kind of a single line about making sure the sage has information.
That's cool. I didn't catch that was the sage they were talking about.
Yeah. So then after Zuko gets knocked out by Aang, they flash back to the Agni Kai with Ozai. And this gives me goosebumps in a bad way because in the scene, Zuko thinks that he's going to fight the general because he questioned what he thought was the general's plan. But then Ozai's like, no, you're fighting me because it was my plan. And you can just see Zuko's heart fall out of him, and he's just trying everything, pleading,
bowing.
Nope, you're gonna have to fight me, kid. And Iroh tries to step in, can't stop it. And in this moment, what could have Iroh done differently in this moment to stop this, Paul?
I'm not an expert. I won't pretend to be an expert on Agni Kai, but I'm sure that Iroh's old enough to know the deeper rules to it. So he probably could have found a way to step in on behalf of the kid and fight in his place. That's one option. Another option would be to double down on the actual insult and be, well, it is a stupid fucking plan, you moron. You're trying to kill some of your youngest troops. What are you going to do to fill their place with the next round of recruits learning about sacrificing their members like this? You're bad for the morale of your own nation. A couple things like that.
Or even just be like, I'm done. I'm taking over the fucking Fire Nation.
Oh, yeah. Challenged him himself. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're fighting your child. I have adopted Zuko now, and I'm going to take you on. I 100% believe Iroh could have taken down Ozai in this moment. And the thing is, he's the firstborn son. So all of the counselors would have fallen in line behind Iroh. Iroh could have stopped all of this.
Oh, man. Hashtag Iroh, you fucked up.
I mean, and that's the thing is everybody makes mistakes in this series.
It's true.
He doesn't want the responsibility, but he should have taken the responsibility. He was the adult. These kids have all these things thrust onto them when you've got all these powerful mentors. Obviously, it doesn't make a good kid's story to have the adults actually take fucking responsibility like they should. But if you've got Boomy, if you've got these master waterbenders, you've got the guy that gave up who's a master firebender. I can't remember his name from the animation. You've got all these super powerful benders who literally just kind of have given up at this point. And you're like, no, if you're this powerful, you could take on this institution. they choose not to. I guess, and Iroh is still somewhat indoctrinated in the Fire Nation way. He was also raised by Sozin.
Yeah, so also mentally tortured.
Yes. Anyway, I think Iroh could have done something. So Zuko's fighting Ozai, and he's holding his own.
Yeah, so Ozai keeps telling him, I want to see everything. Give me everything that you've got.
And Zuko almost gets in a hit, and he pulls back and does not attack his father. And his father sees this as the ultimate form of weakness. And
that's one interpretation. Here's where I'm going to throw out one of my competing less likely theories. I think maybe Ozai could have been mad that Zuko got one through and didn't complete the hit. He knew that he was bested and was bested in a way that, he can't just show oh yeah, he got a hit off on me. I think he was oh, my own kid actually is maybe better than me. You know how parents will sometimes be extra mean at basketball when the kid starts showing that they're actually good at basketball.
Yeah, his ego was challenged in that moment, right? Yeah, I think that's a decent alternative take on that scene, that he might have also felt a little bit of fear of, oh, wait, maybe my son could take me on.
How embarrassing would it be to challenge your son to a duel and get your ass handed and now he's the king? Is that how that works?
Yeah, because if he had lost, so that's why he always uses underhanded tactics, is he uses the mental game as well as the physical game. And I guess if we're talking about the two children, Azula has definitely learned the art of manipulation of people's feelings and thoughts from Ozai, because he is a master, at least in this live action. I don't remember him being so much that way in the cartoon, which I think is more interesting for the character of Ozai, that he is not just this cookie cutter Darth Ozai. He's got a lot of machinations going on.
He's the final boss in the cartoon. That's his placeholder. That's what he does. That's what he is. There's no need to really talk about it.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And in this way, we learn why Azula is the way that she is I think she's learned all of those strategies from her dad, of course. And then the line that his dad says is basically the exact same line that Zuko yells at Aang, which is, compassion is a sign of weakness. And then he starts burning Zuko's face in a way that's, I think, more cruel than it was represented in the cartoon. Because in the cartoon, it was more just he was shooting a huge jet of flame at Zuko, and Zuko just couldn't keep the barrage off of him. Yeah. And gets hit by the flame. But in this, he's literally branding him, holding him down and forcing the mark on his face.
Yeah. And we get reaction shots for Iroh and Azula.
Also a reaction shot of Ozai. I'm wondering what your take is on that, where they're trying to show that he might feel sad about burning Zuko's face. There's a moment when it looks like he kind of regrets doing what he's doing.
Yeah, a softening of his face. It could be a bunch of things. I didn't expect that this was a decision made by the writers, the directors. I think the actor threw in some cool complexity there. I think it's just a general regret. This whole thing didn't go down quite how he thought it might. And, maybe he's being too hard on his son, maybe not. It's just a conflicting storm of emotions.
And then Iroh looks away, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And then Azula, she has again on her face that look of kind of liking it, seeing Zuko in pain.
Yeah, there was a weird lighting effect that made it look like one of her eyes might be tearing up for a split second. And then the light dipped out and you realize it wasn't a tear. Maybe it was a representation of the flash on the branding. But yeah, she's into it.
Yeah, so it's really fucked up. He gets branded by his dad. Then he wakes up and he's on a boat.
I'm on a boat.
Again, a canoe. Where the fuck are they getting all these canoes? Who just leaves their canoe on the river?
This one they talked about. When they were in the hut, Zuko said as a part of their getaway plan that there's a boat not that far away that they can get onto. And then Aang says, well, we can't do that now because the Fire Nation is everywhere, looking everywhere. So that one I give them.
Okay, I guess that's the canoe that he and Iroh used earlier.
Yeah.
In the previous episode. Okay. I'll give it to you, show.
Are we not merciful?
And then Aang, this is where Aang mentions his friend Kuzan. Like, do you think in another world, like, you and I could be friends? And Zuko's answer is to shoot fire at him. And then Aang deflects it again with air, which pushes the boat away, and they just kind of stare at each other. Slow motion. And that's sort of the end of their interactions together, though even this scene I felt was more indicative of what we wanted Aang to be. He seems more mature in this moment and just really reflecting on that, Zuko is more complicated. He's been through a lot. And so I think this is the only episode that you're going to see Aang where you really want to see Aang as his character. Damn.
Well, I hope the rest of the show's about Zuko then.
Iroh is waiting for Zuko on their big boat in the ocean, and Iroh basically shames Mr. Chops and is beginning to tell him why he should be thankful to Zuko for taking them on as a crew. And then they do another flashback to a scene where Zuko is laying in bed, just now recovering from being branded by his dad. And Ozai comes in and Iroh tries to stop Ozai from talking to him. And Ozai arrives at his bedside, Zuko's bedside, and gosh, this actor playing Zuko, he really does such an amazing job, because you see the hate in his eyes at first when he looks at his dad, and then he transitions quickly into "I love my dad." Like you could see it, and he doesn't like say it. Obviously, it's all just in his face about how he's just like, he is so mad at his dad, but he can't bring himself to like hate his dad in that moment, which is basically Zuko's journey throughout the seasons 1 through 3 of the animation, is coming to terms with the fact that, just because someone is your parent, you don't have to love them. You sometimes just need to do the thing that you need to do to protect the people you care about. And if your parent is a raging psycho, then family doesn't matter when your family is murdering millions.
And hurting you and your sister. Not that he seems to care much about his sister at this point.
So Ozai just does this like really shitty speech to his son, like, I was expecting more from you. Your spirit is weak.
Yeah, so some of the bullshit was about sacrificing things that are your weakness, which if you don't give a fuck about it at all, is it really a sacrifice? Like, he's using the wrong language there. And he makes up some bullshit about, I guess you'll probably get to that. It's not in the original speech. It's as he's walking out where he says, okay, well, in that case, since you're going to fight back with your words, I'm going to banish you.
He doesn't want him to be like his mother. It's all about this compassion thing. And even on his like recovery bed, Zuko's like, I think that people who aren't doing as great should still be given a second chance, to do better. And his dad's like, you're weak, just like your mom.
Yeah.
And then banishes him.
Right. So this is kind of my other alternate explanation, and it is sort of related to the other one. So this making up the bullshit about you have to go capture the Avatar and you can't come back until you've done that. The Avatar has not been seen at this point in 97 years. Like, this flashback was 3 years before this season started, and nobody knows why he's gone. This is a lifelong banishment as far as Ozai is concerned. He's scared of his son beating him in a fight and it being better than him. And so he says, you're not allowed to compete with me with your shitty ideas that might actually be popular. You're gonna, like, I'm gonna die before you ever see me again because you're not allowed in my territory.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, a better take on this scene, because I think you're absolutely right that he is threatened by Zuko's ideas more than he is threatened by Zuko being like a weak son. I think you're absolutely right that it's more complicated than that, and that certainly those are pieces of it, but he probably has noticed that Iroh has taken a liking to his son and has been spending time with his son. And
that's a good point too, yeah.
Also that he literally just burned Zuko's face off, and the kid is still sassing him about like Division 41. Like, he is still holding on to his ideals of what his mom taught him. And, it's making me almost cry talking about it, but like, it is a very principled person, strong person to be able to, in the face of someone who you are supposed to love and respect, still appealing to them, wanting them to understand you, hoping for them to understand you. He's trying all the ways, Zuko is, to convince his dad that maybe you could be different. Than your father expected you to be. And that threatens everything that Ozai has been taught to believe by his father, that you were meant to be the God Emperor, basically.
The one who can bring balance to the Force and will be more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
So it makes sense that he sends Zuko away because he doesn't want to be infected by Zuko's compassion. And also he doesn't want other people to be infected by it, which they would because he holds a position of power, Zuko does, as a prince. I really like that take, Paul.
I love it, too, that you expanded on it and made it way better. So thank you. And also, I would like to say that the speculation that we did here was all about like subtle motivations and conflicting facial tweaks. We're really analyzing the show for depths that no other part of the show has ever shown. Like just Fire Nation gets this depth.
Yes. And it's frustrating because I think there's this amount of depth in the other characters, but it's never presented to you in the show. So,
yeah. This was the part where Ozai reveals that, fine, if you want to save Division 41, you can have them as your crew.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which made me wonder, like, sure, that saves the 41st, but, like, that probably means the 42nd's going to get killed in this battle, right?
Well, right. And also, like, why would he do that? Yeah. I think it would hurt his son more to be like, oh, yeah, and we're sending those guys off to die, so...
Yeah, stupidly, he gives a whole division of people who... their lives are now owed to the person who's got a conflicting ideal.
And I think in the original cartoon, I could be really wrong about this, Zuko actually asks for them as his crew. It's not just given to him. So that's a subtle difference that I think makes a difference.
Yeah. So this is the explanation given to Chops by Iroh about how his nephew has sacrificed more than Chops could possibly imagine because he got an ugly eye scar and, you know, banished, and the psychological manipulation was happening anyway. But it was on behalf of the 41st Division at the end of the day. So Chops likes that.
Yeah, he likes that. They all change their tune immediately. The moment Zuko arrives, they all do like a standing salute basically to him. And he's like, what the fuck's going on? Like, why are you guys acting like this? Which is kind of funny, but... and then Iroh says something, I guess they're just miss you for music night, which was a long running thing in the animation where Iroh and the crew would do music nights and all play a different instrument, which is kind of funny. And then, well, we get another voiceover of Iroh's. Again, I didn't really pay attention to what he was saying. A soothing voice of Iroh as we get this really poor payoff to the previous episode. Like Aang flies back, walks into this murder hobo face stealer's cave and just drops the relic on the ground. And it's like, okay, I guess you get everybody back. And he sends the villagers back and he sends Sokka and Katara back. And we're reunited. I don't know. I just felt like
it was shit.
It was so bad. Like, we spent a whole episode about like how crazy and scary the face stealer is, and then like that's the final showdown is soft music with an Uncle Iroh voiceover and like him just giving everything up.
Yeah, he drops the dingle hopper on the ground. The face stealer fades back into the mist, and then it's ambiguous, the payoff at first, because you see some shadows walking through the cave. And I think at best it looks like 3 villagers came back with Sokka and Katara. And that's everyone that was gone. Like,
yeah. And then we also don't get any payoff. Last episode, we were talking about the kid with the doll. Like, no payoff there.
Nope.
Like, Sokka doesn't reunite with her and talk with her.
Bring up the silly name for the doll again.
Yep, nothing.
Nope.
Aang runs back to the hut where he saw Gyatso. Hey, I've totally forgotten about that moment. I'm sure everybody else did too. That's why they had to do a flashback to Gyatso saying that he probably will be here maybe. And then,
I fucking called it. He wasn't going to be there.
He wasn't there. And Aang's sad about it. Aang talks about Gyatso way more than he ever did in the animation, like in this show. Oh,
yeah, because he even talked to Zuko about him in the hut at some point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then we get another cut to Zuko. He's on his ship. He's recovering in his room. He's looking in the mirror, and you see a flashback, or like in the mirror, there's a picture of Zuko when he was young as a teenager. And then it fades
Smiling.
into his burned face. And then there's a line by Uncle Iroh as he's talking about how sometimes the masks we create are the actual
Or who we
person
really
that we
are.
are.
Yes.
And then you see Uncle Iroh put the blue spirit mask away in Zuko's drawer. And I just don't get, like, maybe you can explain to me, Paul, like, what does that mean? Like, I guess I'm just not getting it. The masks that we put on are actually who we are. So which one is Zuko's mask? Is Zuko's mask his rage? Like, I don't understand it. Can you explain it to me?
I don't know if I can explain what they were saying, but I can explain my interpretation. That's going to be have to be good enough. So it's put on that that logic I was talking about earlier, the childhood logic. So Iroh now, as the narrator, knows everything that's been going on. And so he's putting the drawer away of the mask, and that mask is the Zuko that we all wanted to see, who would save Aang and put his own life at risk and his own future at risk to do the right thing, even though, I mean, don't look too deep into the reasons, because we all know Zuko's going to put him on the boat, put him back in chains, and then bring him himself.
Well, and he was just doing that all for his own benefit.
Exactly.
So, anyway, continue.
And so, yeah, I think that the blue spirit is like a sort of, this is the part of Zuko that will be in Team Avatar later. This is his good side, and that's the true Zuko.
Yeah, it's just still...
It's weird. It's...
How does the blue mask and what the blue mask represented to Zuko in this episode relate to the masks of who we are and who we aren't? They don't connect to me.
No.
And so, like,
and there's only one person wearing a mask in this episode. Aang.
Yeah.
Maybe Aang is putting on the mask of being the Aang from the cartoons because he's actually engaging.
Yeah, I guess if I don't understand it, who's a person that's pretty good at picking up plots and figuring out like how one thing melds into another, if you're confusing me with this, you're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
But again, you don't really pay attention to, at least I don't, exactly what's being said in the voiceovers. And I think what's more poignant in this scene is that Zuko is learning to accept, maybe this is the mask, accept that this part of himself that's been scarred is actually his true self. And the one that he wants to be, or who he remembers being, and it's sort of like his ideal self, which was his innocent self, is actually not the better person. That who he has become now is a better person, or is a better version of himself, I guess.
I think your explanation is better, and so they should have swapped the images so that we end with Zuko looking at his two different faces in the mirror at the line where he says the mask is who we really are.
Yes. Like, why do you then transition to the blue spirit mask? The blue spirit mask is like just a version of himself who's a mercenary. It doesn't make any sense.
A covert ops expert is who I really am.
Oh, God. Okay, well, I would say, if I was rating this on a 0 to 10 scale, and not that we've done this in one of these episodes before, every episode of this show, it's sort of like the first season of The Next Generation. Cam, John, Jesse, all those people who are Star Trek fans of mine, you'll know that the first season of TNG is shit. And I would say that, like, this hits, like, maybe that, like, 6 or 7 level, like, if 10 is, like, the best episode of any show. And so all of the other episodes were, like, way below this. So this is an amazing episode for this particular show.
There we have it. An unambiguous rating system. Say this is the best we've got, and it's a 6.
It's a 6. So I don't really have any more to say. We've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about. Like, I didn't really cry in this episode as much as the last one, but I feel like as a full episode, it was the most cohesive that we have gotten.
And you already said it was largely because they didn't break the plot up into 3 different story arcs and they merged them together. Zuko is one of the older of the actors, so maybe the age experience is a big part of that. It takes from 2 good episodes that were also in the correct season, and that shouldn't be ignored either.
All right, well, like I said before, I am super excited for Fallout, and we'll keep getting through these Avatar The Last Airbender episodes, and then move on to Fallout, because it's going to be amazing. So then we start getting into them getting to the Northern Water Tribes. So the next episode is the North. If you'd like to, please rate us on wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can check me out on any social media under Idle Ride or Idle Ride Podcast, and also email us. And yeah, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.